Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well in this quarantine time. I know it's chaotic. I remember at the beginning of this, I was talking to my roommate and I said, the only cool thing about this is that we're living through something that our kids and grandkids will ask us about. This is definitely something that our generation is not used to. My roommate said, we're all post-gens for major events like 9/11, World War II, the Cold War. We're all living in times after that has happened. I couldn't help when I was making my speech but see a similarity in our situation today and the events that occurred in AD 79 at Pompeii, albeit it's a really, really slight similarity. We are all living and experiencing history. We will all have experiences from this experience to tell others about. Now, some of you may think that history is a waste of time, but the fact that we are experiencing a situation not completely unlike that of Pompeii proves that history should be respected and analyzed. Now, if you guys remember, Pompeii was miraculously preserved due to the volcano's debris and tephra that fell on the town, and this allows us to closely examine daily Roman life. As I did my research, I came across a few books, one of which was written during the major excavations in the 1800s. It provides accurate details of artifacts as they were being discovered, so I'm very excited to share all of that with you. I also found a art guide of Pompeii, which basically gave me a tour of the whole town and showed me what you could find in the city. First, I want to show you how we're similar to Pompeians through the tools and the everyday items that they used. And then I want to tell you about the events that followed the disaster. And these connections will then prove why it is vital to appreciate and study history. So firstly, we can see how Pompeians are similar to us through their tools. As you can see on the left, on the top left, that is a stove that is found in Pompeii. And on the bottom left are some kitchen utensils. And you can see that they're very similar to the ones in our own kitchens. I think it's very fascinating that kitchen utensils have not changed in thousands of years. On the right, we have some really interesting locations. So the bottom right is called a thermopolium, or today it would be called a diner. In one of the art guides it says, quote, "There were many such places for hot meals, since it was common for people to eat out for their midday meal." So the holes in the counter, so to speak, was where the food would be placed, and there would be a little fire or some embers in the, below it to keep it warm. And there were even rooms in the back that could, where people could sit and everything and enjoy their meal. So it's very similar to a restaurant that we would see today. And the picture on the top right is of a bakery. You can see the oven arch is still intact, and much of the building is very intact. And speaking of that bakery, in the 1800s, they found 81 loaves of bread in that same oven, still intact. As you can see on the top right, that's what it looks like today. But the book from the 1800s stated, quote, "Loaves are still made in Sicily exactly like them." As you can see on the bottom right picture, we basically eat the same bread that these people did, which I think is very, very fascinating. And it shows how well preserved things were in Pompeii. This image may not look like much, but it's one of the most interesting things that I found out about Pompeii. So the writing reads, quote, "I ask you to elect Holconius Priscus, a man worthy of the Republic, as Duumvir." So this is an electoral slogan found in Pompeii, and he's asking to be part of the magistrate, where they had votings year-round. It was an annual thing. So I thought that was very fascinating because people wouldn't think that they would have, presidential or, electoral slogans and propaganda, but it was very similar to what we have today. And then one of the last things I want to show you that they experienced in Pompeii, this is from the workshop of Verecundus, and it showcases what he works on. So he's a felter, and he makes clothes and shoes. So this is basically an advertisement outside of his shop, showcasing what he works on. So you know what you're going to buy in this shop. I thought it was very fascinating to find advertisements and slogans in this ancient time. Now, items and little clues about society are great to compare to ours, but the events that followed the catastrophe shows likeness between us even more. For instance, people fled from Pompeii. Obviously, only about 2,000 people remained in the city. The rest of them, in a population of about 10 to 20,000, only 2,000 people remained in the city. So where did all of these other people go? In one of the articles about refugees from Vesuvius, it says, quote, "Like refugees today, people generally chose to resettle where they already had family or economic ties." This can be found in many different cities around Pompeii. For instance, there's a gravestone found in another city in the local language of Pompeii, which is Oscan, which is what you see here. This says have, or hail, or welcome. And this language was only really found in Pompeii. So this indicates that Pompeians did move and kind of kept their culture alive a little bit. And another evidence of this is that there were cults found in other cities that were prominent in Pompeii of the certain deities that they worshipped in Pompeii. And they're found in other cities that they weren't really prominent before Vesuvius happened. And so that also indicates that they kept their culture alive in these other cities. Another very fascinating thing about the response to the disaster was the relief from the government. So the government played a major role in expanding and supporting the communities that were affected by this disaster. And the Emperor Tacitus even provided 2 magistrates that their sole job was to help these distressed communities. So it was very fascinating to see how the government wasn't just like, oh, like, you're fine, like, you can, like, survival of the fittest kind of thing. Very fascinating to see compassion and a need to help in these people. So in conclusion, by looking at these tools and clues from their daily life, we can see similarities very clearly. We can also see very big similarities in the responses to the disaster. One of the articles says, quote, "Modern governments could stand to learn a thing or two from how the Romans dealt with the Vesuvius crisis." So there's a saying that most of you have probably heard, that history is bound to repeat itself. We can see it happening in our own lives today. Therefore, history is a great place to start when we need to solve problems that reoccur over time, like a pandemic or a natural disaster. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Pompeii with me, and I hope you see that history has a more important role in our lives than we think. Thank you.